Long version. The Bellissimo Grand Restaurant was one of the most exclusive places in Manhattan. Every night, politicians, celebrities, CEOs, and billionaires filled its crystal-lit dining hall. People came for the food. They stayed for the prestige. Getting a reservation there often required weeks of waiting. Yet despite all the luxury surrounding her, Emma Carter felt invisible. At 32 years old, Emma had spent nearly 5 years working as a waitress at Bellissimo. She knew every corner of the restaurant, every regular customer, every wine bottle, every secret conversation. But no matter how hard she worked, people rarely remembered her name. They remembered the beautiful hostesses. They remembered the glamorous women in designer dresses. They remembered the wealthy men. Nobody remembered the plus-size waitress carrying trays through the room. Emma had grown used to it. Still, some days hurt more than others. Especially when people assumed they knew everything about her after looking at her for 3 seconds. That Thursday evening started like every other shift. Emma arrived early. She tied her blonde hair neatly behind her shoulders, adjusted her uniform, checked the dining room, then got to work. The restaurant buzzed with activity. Silverware sparkled beneath chandeliers. Classical music floated softly through hidden speakers. The scent of garlic, fresh bread, expensive wine, and grilled steak filled the air. Customers laughed. Business deals were negotiated. Anniversaries were celebrated. Emma moved from table to table with practiced efficiency. She smiled warmly, remembered names, remembered favorite meals, remembered allergies. She did everything perfectly, but nobody noticed. Near the hostess stand, 2 wealthy women were talking. One glanced toward Emma. Such a shame. What? She has a pretty face. The second woman followed her gaze. Oh, if she lost some weight. They laughed quietly. Emma heard every word. She always did. Years of experience had taught her how to smile while pretending not to hear. Inside, though, it still stung. Not because she hated herself. Because she didn't. Emma actually liked who she was. She simply hated how often people decided her worth based on her size. If they took 5 minutes to know her, they'd discover things most never imagined. She spoke fluent Italian, fluent French, fluent Spanish, and English. She held a university degree in linguistics. She loved literature. She played piano. She volunteered at local shelters. But none of that mattered, because most people never looked beyond appearances. At exactly 8:07 p.m., everything changed. The restaurant's main doors opened. A sudden silence swept through the room. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Emma looked up. Everyone looked up. A group of men entered. The first thing she noticed was their confidence. The second was how everyone else reacted. People stopped talking. Waiters froze. Even the musicians seemed distracted. At the center of the group stood a man unlike anyone Emma had ever seen. Tall, broad-shouldered, powerfully built. Dark hair slicked perfectly back. Sharp jawline. Cold eyes. Black tailored suit worth more than Emma earned in months. A luxury watch gleamed beneath the restaurant lights. The man's presence dominated the room.
He didn't need to speak.
He didn't need to move. People simply noticed him. Whispers immediately spread. Oh my God. That's Vittorio Romano. No way. The Vittorio Romano? The billionaire? The Romano Group owner? The Italian businessman? The whispers grew louder. Some guests looked excited. Others looked nervous. A few looked genuinely afraid. Emma recognized the name. Everyone in New York did. Vittorio Romano was one of the wealthiest men in America. Officially, he owned luxury hotels, shipping companies, and real estate. Unofficially, rumors followed him everywhere. Dangerous rumors. Nobody knew what was true. Nobody dared ask. Restaurant manager Daniel Russo practically sprinted toward the entrance. His face looked pale. Mr. Romano, he said nervously. Welcome to Bellissimo. Vittorio nodded once, then spoke. In rapid Italian. Daniel blinked. His smile disappeared. I'm sorry. Vittorio repeated himself. Slower. Still Italian. Daniel understood nothing. The manager's face turned red. Oh, right. Yes. Of course. He clearly had no idea what was happening. One of Vittorio's security men stepped forward. Mr. Romano prefers Italian. Daniel's stomach dropped. The restaurant's only Italian-speaking server had called in sick earlier that day. Nobody else spoke fluently. Daniel knew a few words, barely enough to order food. Certainly not enough to assist one of New York's most powerful billionaires. Vittorio spoke again. His voice remained calm, but his patience was fading. Daniel attempted a response. The response made absolutely no sense. Several members of Vittorio's group exchanged annoyed looks. The billionaire's jaw tightened. The misunderstanding continued. Every attempt made things worse. Guests watched openly now. The entire restaurant had become an audience. Emma could feel the tension building. She watched Vittorio carefully. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't intimidated. She saw something others missed. He wasn't angry.
He was frustrated.
There was a difference. The billionaire simply wanted someone to understand him. Nobody could. Finally, Daniel looked desperate. Does anybody here speak Italian? Silence. Nobody answered. Vittorio's expression darkened. His patience was nearly gone. Then Emma took a breath and stepped forward. Sir. Daniel turned immediately. Emma? She ignored him. Instead, she looked directly at Vittorio Romano. For a moment, their eyes met. Emma felt an unexpected jolt. Those dark eyes were intense, powerful, observant, like nothing escaped them. Most people looked through her. This man looked directly at her. It felt strangely unsettling. Then Emma spoke. Perfect Italian. Good evening, Mr. Romano. Welcome to Bellissimo. How may I help you? The restaurant froze.
Completely.
Every sound disappeared. Even Daniel looked shocked. Several guests actually turned around in their chairs. The billionaire stared at Emma. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Then something extraordinary happened. For the first time since entering the restaurant, Vittorio Romano smiled. A real smile. Not large, not dramatic, but genuine. And somehow that smile transformed his entire face. You speak Italian? He asked. Emma smiled politely. Yes. Fluently. The billionaire looked genuinely surprised, then impressed.
Perfectly, he said.
Where did you learn? My grandmother was born in Florence. For the first time all evening, Vittorio seemed relaxed. The tension vanished. The frustration disappeared. And suddenly the most feared man in the restaurant was speaking comfortably with a waitress everyone else ignored. The crowd couldn't believe what they were seeing. Neither could Daniel. Emma quickly translated everything Vittorio needed. Within minutes, the misunderstanding was solved. The billionaire and his guests were escorted to the finest private dining area in the restaurant. Problem solved. Or so everyone thought. Because as Vittorio followed the hostess toward his table,
He paused.
turned around, and looked directly at Emma again. His gaze lingered longer than necessary. Long enough for people to notice. Long enough for Emma's heart to beat slightly faster. Then he asked a simple question in Italian. Will you be serving our table tonight? Emma blinked. I believe so. A small smile appeared again. Good. Then Vittorio Romano walked away, leaving behind a stunned restaurant. And leaving Emma with a strange feeling she couldn't explain. Because for the first time in years, someone powerful had truly seen her. And neither of them knew it yet. But that single conversation was about to change both of their lives forever. Long version. The moment Vittorio Romano disappeared into the private dining hall, the entire restaurant exploded with whispers. Emma barely made it 3 steps before another waitress grabbed her arm. Since when do you speak Italian? Emma laughed softly. Since I was 5. The waitress stared. You never told anyone. Nobody asked. That answer somehow shocked everyone even more. Manager Daniel Russo approached quickly. Emma. Yes. You speak Italian like a native. My grandmother made sure of that. Daniel shook his head. I've worked with you for 5 years. I had no idea. Emma smiled politely. Most people don't. Daniel looked as though he wanted to say something else but stopped. Because deep down he knew she was right. Most people never bothered learning anything about Emma. They simply assumed they already knew her. Unfortunately, the whispers throughout the restaurant weren't all positive. Near the bar, several guests continued talking. Can you believe it?
What?
Vittorio Romano smiled at her. No chance. I saw it. Maybe he was being polite.
The group laughed.
One woman rolled her eyes. Men like Vittorio Romano don't notice women like her. Emma heard that too. And once again, she pretended not to. But for some reason, those words bothered her less than usual. Maybe because she wasn't trying to impress anyone. Maybe because she had spent years accepting who she was. Or maybe because those dark eyes still lingered in her mind. Meanwhile, inside the private dining room, Vittorio Romano sat at the head of a massive table. His executives discussed business. His security team remained alert. Luxury wine was poured. Expensive dishes arrived. Yet Vittorio wasn't listening. His thoughts kept returning to the blonde waitress. Emma Carter. There was something unusual about her. Most people became nervous around him. Some became overly friendly. Others acted terrified. Emma had done none of those things. She simply treated him like a normal human being. It felt surprisingly refreshing. One of his business associates noticed his distraction. Something wrong? Vittorio glanced up.
No.
You seem distracted. Do I? The man smiled. You haven't looked at a single report in 10 minutes. That was true. Vittorio leaned back in his chair. His life was filled with beautiful women, models, actresses,
Socialites.
Women constantly pursued him. Yet none of them occupied his thoughts the way that waitress suddenly did. It made no sense. A knock interrupted the room. A server entered carrying wine. Not Emma. Vittorio frowned slightly. 5 minutes later, another server arrived. Still not Emma. By the third interruption, his irritation was obvious. Finally, he looked toward the manager. Where is Emma? Daniel blinked. Sir? The waitress.
Oh.
Daniel seemed surprised. She is serving the main dining room. Vittorio nodded slowly. Have her serve this table. The room went silent. Several executives exchanged looks. Daniel hesitated. Of course. 10 minutes later, Emma entered carrying a tray. The moment she stepped inside, every conversation stopped. The private dining room suddenly felt different. Emma noticed immediately. 20 powerful men sat around the table. Most were staring at her, including Vittorio. Good evening, she said professionally. May I bring anyone dessert? Nobody answered. Not because they didn't want dessert. Because they were watching Vittorio. And Vittorio was watching Emma. The billionaire finally spoke. In Italian. How has your evening been? Emma answered naturally. Busy. A small smile touched his lips. Because of me? Partially. Several executives looked confused. Neither realized the entire conversation was happening in Italian. Vittorio chuckled. A genuine chuckle. His associates looked shocked. Most hadn't heard him laugh in months. Sit. Emma blinked. Excuse me? Sit for a moment. She almost laughed. I'm working. 5 minutes. Mr. Romano. Vittorio. The room became silent again. Nobody called him Vittorio. Nobody. Not employees. Not executives. Not journalists. Yet he wanted her to. Emma chose her next words carefully. I appreciate the offer, but I'm still working. For the first time in years, someone had refused him. And strangely, he respected it. A lot. Instead of becoming angry, Vittorio smiled. Fair enough. Emma relaxed. Then she noticed something. One executive near the end of the table was watching her strangely. The man leaned toward another executive. He whispered something. Both laughed. Emma recognized that look. She'd seen it her entire life. Judgment. Mockery. Assumptions. Vittorio noticed too. His eyes narrowed immediately. The room temperature seemed to drop. What was funny? The executive froze. Nothing. Tell me. The man swallowed. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Finally, the executive forced a smile. Just a joke. Vittorio's voice became ice. Explain it. The executive looked terrified now. Because everyone understood something. Vittorio wasn't asking. He was demanding. The man glanced toward Emma, then looked away. His silence said everything. And suddenly Vittorio understood. His expression darkened. Slowly, dangerously. You mocked her. The executive tried to deny it, but nobody believed him. Especially Vittorio. The billionaire stood. Every person at the table immediately became nervous. Do you know what I see when I look at Emma Carter? Nobody answered. Because I see intelligence. Silence. I see confidence. More silence. I see someone who speaks multiple languages. The executive looked increasingly uncomfortable. I see someone who accomplished more through hard work than many people accomplish with privilege. Nobody dared speak. Vittorio looked directly at the executive. But apparently all you saw was her appearance. The room remained frozen. Emma herself couldn't believe what she was hearing. Nobody had ever defended her like this. Nobody. Especially not someone like Vittorio Romano. The billionaire's gaze shifted toward her. And for a brief moment, the cold businessman disappeared. What remained was something else. Respect. Genuine respect. And Emma felt her heart skip. Because she suddenly realized something dangerous. The most powerful man she had ever met wasn't looking at her with pity. He wasn't looking at her with amusement. He wasn't looking at her as a curiosity. He was looking at her as if she mattered. And that frightened her more than anything. Because for the first time in years, Emma Carter found herself unable to look away. Long version. After Emma left the private dining room, she tried convincing herself that nothing unusual had happened. But her heart disagreed. Every step back toward the main dining area felt strange. For years she had worked among wealthy people, powerful people, famous people. Yet none had ever defended her the way Vittorio Romano had. Most ignored her. Some pitied her. Others mocked her. Vittorio had done something different. He respected her. And somehow that felt far more dangerous. Because respect had a way of breaking down walls that Emma had spent years building. She returned to work. Focused on customers. Delivered meals. Refilled drinks. Smiled politely. But no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts kept returning to the billionaire sitting behind the private dining room doors. Meanwhile, Vittorio Romano wasn't paying attention to dinner anymore. His executives continued discussing contracts worth hundreds of millions. He barely listened. His mind remained occupied by Emma Carter, the woman nobody else seemed to notice. The woman who somehow managed to stand out in a room full of beautiful socialites and celebrities. Not because of her appearance. Because of who she was. That was rare. Very rare. Especially in his world. One of his senior advisors finally spoke. Vittorio. The billionaire looked up. Yes. You've been distracted all evening. Several executives exchanged nervous glances. Nobody usually commented on Vittorio's behavior. The advisor continued carefully. May I ask why? Vittorio took a sip of wine. Then answered honestly. That waitress. The entire table froze. The advisor blinked. The waitress? Emma. Nobody knew what to say. This conversation was becoming increasingly unusual. You seem interested in her. Vittorio's eyes narrowed. Interested? The advisor immediately regretted speaking. Yet Vittorio surprised everyone. Because instead of becoming angry, he smiled. Slightly. Perhaps. The room practically stopped breathing. The feared businessman never discussed women. Ever. Yet, tonight seemed different. Very different. 2 hours later, the dinner finally ended. Executives gathered their documents. Security teams prepared for departure. The manager hurried forward. Mr. Romano, thank you for visiting Bellissimo. Vittorio nodded. Then asked a question. Where is Emma? Daniel looked surprised. She's finishing her shift. I'll wait. The manager nearly dropped the wine menu in his hands. You'll wait? Yes. Daniel stared. One of the richest men in New York was voluntarily waiting for a waitress. Nothing about this evening made sense anymore. Across the restaurant, Emma was cleaning a table when another waitress rushed toward her. You need to come with me. Emma frowned. Why? Because Vittorio Romano is asking for you. Her heart skipped.
What?
He's waiting. Emma suddenly felt nervous. For the first time all evening. Not because she feared him, because she didn't understand him. And uncertainty made her uncomfortable. A few moments later, she approached the lobby. Vittorio stood near the entrance.
Tall. Confident.
Powerful. Several security guards remained nearby. Yet somehow he looked completely relaxed. When he saw Emma approaching, something softened in his expression. Emma. Mr. Romano. He smiled. You can call me Vittorio. She hesitated. Old habits are hard to break. Try. A small laugh escaped her. Unexpectedly, Vittorio noticed, and found himself wanting to hear it again. The realization caught him off guard. For years his life had revolved around power, business, money,
Control.
feelings rarely entered the equation. Yet this woman somehow disrupted all of that without even trying. Would you like coffee? Emma blinked. What?
Coffee.
She stared at him. The billionaire was asking her to coffee. This had to be some kind of joke. Unfortunately for her assumptions, Vittorio Romano never joked. I'm not sure that's appropriate. Why? You are one of the most powerful businessmen in New York. And I'm a waitress. The answer came instantly. And Emma didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever responded like that. Most people focused entirely on status, titles, money, appearances. Vittorio seemed completely uninterested in those things. At least where she was concerned. You don't see a problem with that? His dark eyes met hers.
No.
The answer was immediate.
Certain.
Absolute. Emma looked away first, because something about that gaze made her pulse quicken. And she wasn't ready to examine why. Before she could answer, another voice interrupted. Vittorio. Everyone turned. A glamorous woman wearing a designer red dress hurried toward them. She was beautiful, elegant, the type of woman magazines featured on covers, the type of woman people expected beside a billionaire. She stopped beside Vittorio and kissed his cheek, then noticed Emma. Immediately, the woman's smile disappeared. Who is she? Vittorio's expression became cold. Diana. The woman ignored the warning. Her eyes moved across Emma's body. Judgment filled them instantly. Emma recognized the look. She had seen it thousands of times. Diana laughed softly. A waitress? Nobody spoke. The woman turned back toward Vittorio. You left your own event for a waitress? The insult hung in the air. Emma prepared herself for the usual outcome. The wealthy woman would win.
She always did.
People like Diana always won. At least that had been Emma's experience. Then Vittorio spoke. And everything changed. Careful. The single word carried enough force to silence the entire room. Diana blinked. What? His eyes hardened. I said be careful. The woman looked shocked. Nobody spoke to her like that, especially not publicly. Vittorio stepped closer. His voice remained calm, but somehow that made it more intimidating. Emma has shown me more kindness and intelligence in one evening than most people show in a lifetime. Silence. Diana, if you wish to stay in this conversation, you'll treat her with respect. The woman looked stunned, humiliated, furious. Emma stood speechless, because, once again, Vittorio Romano had defended her, not because he had to,
Because he wanted to.
Diana left moments later, furious, embarrassed, and completely defeated. When she disappeared, Emma finally found her voice. You didn't need to do that. Vittorio looked at her. Yes. You did.
No.
His gaze never left hers. I really did. For several seconds, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to fade. The restaurant, the people, the noise. Everything disappeared. Only the two of them remained. Then Vittorio reached into his jacket pocket, removed a business card, and handed it to her. The card was simple, elegant, powerful, just like the man offering it. If you ever need anything. Emma looked at him. Anything, anything. Her heart beat faster, because somehow she knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. And neither of them realized yet that powerful enemies had already started watching. And they were not happy about the growing connection between Vittorio Romano and Emma Carter. Final part, long version. The ballroom was still buzzing long after Vittorio publicly defended Emma. Guests whispered in every corner. Some were shocked. Some were jealous. Others were simply curious. Because for the first time in years, the powerful Vittorio Romano had shown genuine affection toward someone. And that someone wasn't a model, wasn't a celebrity, wasn't the daughter of a billionaire. It was Emma Carter, a waitress, a woman most people had ignored their entire lives. Yet somehow she had become the center of attention. Unfortunately, attention always attracted enemies. And enemies were something Vittorio Romano had plenty of. Near the back of the ballroom stood a man nobody recognized. His name was Victor Salazar, one of Vittorio's oldest rivals. A man whose criminal empire had suffered greatly because of Vittorio's success. For years Victor had searched for a weakness, a vulnerability, anything he could use. But Vittorio never gave him one. The billionaire protected himself carefully. He trusted very few people. He loved no one. He feared nothing. At least until now. Victor watched Emma and smiled. Because he finally understood. Emma Carter wasn't just important. She was special. And that made her dangerous. Not dangerous to Vittorio. Dangerous to anyone who wanted to hurt him. Because now he had something to lose. Meanwhile, Emma stood beside Vittorio on the ballroom balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly below. The music from inside drifted softly through the night air. For the first time all evening they were alone. Or as alone as a billionaire surrounded by security could ever be. Emma looked toward him. You didn't have to do that. Vittorio smiled slightly. I know. Then why did you? The answer came instantly. Because it was true. Because I wanted to. Emma's heart skipped. Again. It seemed to happen a lot around him. She looked away toward the skyline, trying to hide the smile threatening to appear. You make things very difficult. Vittorio laughed quietly. I've been told that before. Emma shook her head. Then became serious. People will talk. They already are. They'll assume things. They already do. Emma couldn't argue with that. The entire city seemed fascinated by them, which made no sense, at least to her. Vittorio looked directly at her. Does it bother you? Emma considered the question, then answered honestly. A little. Why? Because I don't understand why you're interested in me. The words escaped before she could stop them. Vittorio stared at her. Not angry. Not offended. Simply surprised.
Emma. His voice softened.
When was the last time someone truly listened to you? She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. When was the last time someone cared about what you thought instead of how you looked? Still silence. Vittorio continued. Most people spend their lives chasing beauty. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes. I've spent my life surrounded by beautiful people. Emma listened quietly. And, do you know what I learned? What? Beauty, without kindness, becomes ugly very quickly. The words hit her harder than expected. Because nobody had ever said something like that to her. Not sincerely. Not honestly. Vittorio stepped closer. I noticed you because of who you are. Their eyes met. And once I got to know you, he smiled. I couldn't stop noticing. For a moment neither moved. Neither spoke. The city disappeared around them. Only the two of them existed. Then suddenly, a loud crash echoed from inside the ballroom. Both turned instantly. Security reacted immediately. The peaceful atmosphere vanished. Downstairs, panic erupted. Guests rushed in different directions. People shouted. Glasses shattered. Vittorio's security team moved quickly. Marco appeared moments later. His expression was serious. Boss. What happened? We caught someone. Vittorio's eyes narrowed.
Who?
Marco handed over a phone. On the screen appeared several photographs. Emma looked confused. Vittorio became very still. Dangerously still. Because the photographs showed Emma. Leaving work. Walking home.
Shopping.
Visiting her grandmother. Someone had been following her. For weeks. Emma's blood ran cold. What is this? Marco answered carefully. Surveillance. The realization hit her instantly. Someone had been watching her. And not casually. Obsessively. Vittorio's expression darkened.
Who?
Marco's jaw tightened. Victor Salazar. The name alone changed everything. Every security guard became alert. Every member of Vittorio's team understood the danger. Emma did not, but she could see it in their faces. This was serious. Very serious. Vittorio looked at Marco. Where is he? We have a location. Silence. The dangerous kind. Then Vittorio made a decision. Bring the car. 1 hour later, the convoy stopped outside an abandoned warehouse near the harbor. Rain poured heavily. Thunder echoed overhead. The atmosphere felt like something from a movie. Emma remained inside the armored SUV,
Protected by security.
while Vittorio stepped into the storm. Marco followed. Several guards spread out. Inside the warehouse waited Victor Salazar, the rival who believed Emma was Vittorio's weakness. The rival who thought he could use her. He had made a terrible mistake. Because Vittorio Romano could tolerate many things. Disrespect, competition, business conflicts. But threatening someone he cared about? Never. Victor smiled when Vittorio entered. You finally found something worth protecting. Vittorio's eyes were ice cold. You're finished. Victor laughed. Because of a waitress? The next few seconds changed everything. Vittorio didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't negotiate. He simply walked forward. And Victor finally realized the truth. Emma wasn't Vittorio's weakness. She was the reason he had become more dangerous than ever. 3 months later, New York looked very different. Victor Salazar's organization had collapsed. His empire disappeared. His influence vanished. The threat was gone. Forever. And for the first time in years, peace returned. One sunny afternoon, Bellissimo Restaurant hosted a private celebration. Employees gathered around smiling. Daniel looked emotional. The waitresses whispered excitedly. Even the chefs left the kitchen. Because something extraordinary was happening. Emma Carter was leaving. Not because she was fired. Not because she had failed. Because her life had changed. And standing beside her was the reason why. Vittorio Romano. The billionaire smiled as Emma laughed with her coworkers. Something he never did before meeting her. People noticed. Everyone noticed. Because Emma had transformed him. Made him kinder. Warmer.
Happier.
And somehow she had done it simply by being herself. Later that evening, Vittorio took Emma to the rooftop garden of Romano Tower. The same place where they often escape the chaos of a city. The sunset painted the skyline gold. The wind moved gently through Emma's hair. She smiled. This is beautiful. Vittorio looked at her.
No.
Emma laughed. What? This is. Then he got down on one knee. Emma froze.
Completely.
For the first time in her life, she couldn't find words. The powerful billionaire opened a small velvet box. Inside was a stunning diamond ring. The city seemed to stop. The world seemed to disappear. Only one question remained. Vittorio's voice was steady, but his eyes revealed everything.
Hope. Love.
Vulnerability. Things nobody else ever saw. Emma Carter. A smile touched his lips. The night we met, everyone in that restaurant saw a waitress. His gaze never left hers. I saw the woman who changed my life. Tears filled Emma's eyes. I love you. The words were simple, but real. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. He took a breath, then asked the question. Will you marry me? Emma laughed through her tears. The happiest laugh of her life. Then nodded. Yes. The answer came instantly, without hesitation, without doubt. Yes. Vittorio stood and pulled her into his arms. The city lights sparkled around them. The future stretched ahead. And for the first time in years, both of them knew exactly where they belonged. Together. Will you marry me? Emma laughed through her tears. The happiest laugh of her life. Then nodded. Yes. The answer came instantly, without hesitation, without doubt. Yes. Vittorio stood and pulled her into his arms. The city lights sparkled around them. The future stretched ahead. And for the first time in years, Both of them knew exactly where they belonged. Together.